Så i denne utgaven av Registolen så skal jeg snakke med Jay Choi, som en manusforfatter og regissør fra Seoul, Sør-Korea. Hun studerte skuespill på RADA, eller The Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts i London. Hun har skrevet og regissert en rekke prosjekter siden hun uteksaminerte i 2012, og for tiden masterstudent i TV-regi på Den norske filmskolen. Vi skal snakke om kortfilmen hennes Søppel, som hun utviklet gjennom ulike blikkprogrammer til Viken Filmsenter, Mediefabrikken og Oslo 16. Den ligger ute på Mediefabrikken sine sider, som vi selvfølgelig anbefaler alle å se i forkant av denne samtalen. So, Jay, I'm so happy to be talking to you about your film Søppel, or Trash in English. So for our listeners, I wanted to do the introduction or the summary of the film in English to sort of segue into our conversation. It is about a curator who kicks out a mother and her baby when they fail to comply with the gallery's rules. And some guests disapprove of the curator's actions and debate on the value of modern art. And a debate on the value of modern art ensues. And you said that this is a short film about the relationship between life and art and the inevitability of chaos. So I want to talk to you about your film in just a moment, but I want to ask you first if you could talk briefly about your background and how you got into filmmaking.
I was born in South Korea, and I grew up here and there in different countries. And I became quite obsessed with films around high school, but then I didn't feel like I had the competence to go to an art school. So I just majored in literature, but then I joined a drama club and fell in love with acting. So I ended up in a drama school in London. But then after 3 years of training and 2 years of working as a professional actor, I just had this really strong feeling that this wasn't the right path for me. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to have more control over the stories I was telling, and I wanted to tell my own stories. So I started writing and directing and made my first short film in, around 2012, 2013. And it's been like that since, making short films and occasionally doing theatre. And now I'm lucky enough to be developing a feature film in London with the BFI, and then going to the school in Norway.
Mm-hmm. You know, I want to talk to you. I want to talk about those projects in just a little bit, but I want to concentrate on this short film, Trash, first, and I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the background story for it, because I might remember this incorrectly, but during the Ulike Blikk, or Different Perspectives program, I think you mentioned it being inspired by real events, but I'm not entirely sure. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about that, like the initial idea and how it also evolved from that, like during the course of the program.
Oh, I see that background. Okay. Well, my daughter was like 1 or 1.5 years old, and we went to a gallery in Oslo, and then there was this piece, which was an installation piece. And it kind of reminded me of squats, the aesthetics of it. And so I got into the old, squat mode, and got my daughter and myself in there. Mm-hmm. And my daughter started playing with the toilet paper and shoving it down the toilet, and I thought it was really funny. Mm-hmm. And there was no sign saying, do not touch. So I didn't really think too much about it. Mm-hmm. But then once she came out, there were these guards who had seen us, and they came running towards us and said, "Oh my God, you've touched the installation." And so they brought down this formal piece of paper for me to sign. And so I had to sign it, and they explained if there's something wrong with the insurance, I might have to pay, but probably it'll be okay. But I was a bit dazzled. But afterwards, even though no one had been really rude to me, they were all very nice, I felt a bit angry. Mm-hmm. And I think it was to do with the fact that there's a piece of artwork that seems to be about chaos and almost promoting chaos. And God knows what the artist wanted the audience to do. Maybe he wanted the audience to interact with it. But once it's in a gallery, this institution, it becomes this holy thing and it gains power. And if you do anything to it, then there are formal and very serious consequences, possibly. And that whole power structure made me a bit angry. And I tried to channel that anger into this short film. And Mediefabrikken had this really interesting Ulike program going on. So I applied. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how much did it evolve from the event that inspired the idea to the final film?
Right. When I was applying for the Ulike program, all the heart attack and the destruction of this the art piece was in the outline. I guess what really changed for me was during the course of Mediefabrikken's program was how much I empathized with the main character, who is the gallery guy. Before, he felt like this, like, oh, he's going to be the guy who's going to learn a lesson, you know, he represents authority, blah, blah, blah. But then I realized I started empathizing with his passion for art and his obsession with perfection, you know. And so in the course of the program, I think I ended up making him much more of a main character than he originally intended, but also hopefully more easy to empathize with in his crazed passion, you know.
Yeah, he definitely like goes on an emotional journey. Like he comes out the other end like more sympathetic for sure than in the beginning, like when we first meet him and how he first reacts to the destruction of the installation as well. So that's interesting. Was it intended to be an ensemble piece? Was the mother intended to be the main protagonist at first, and then that changed, or like how, or was the gallerist or the curator, I guess, always intended as the protagonist?
It was very much intended as an ensemble piece, actually. But in the course of writing it and in the pre-production, I became really obsessed with the film, and I could see the destructive effect it was having on my family. And then that's when I really started empathizing with the main character. And then in the process of shooting it, I realized we didn't have enough time. We had only one day, and then I had to prioritize shots. And I thought, okay, I'm going to prioritize the gallerist. Yeah, and then the editing, of course, consolidated it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So how, because I'm interested in talking about like how you approach directing, coming from an acting background, and how you think like your training at RADA might have had an impact on your directorial work. Like, do you have a shorthand with actors, for instance, or do you find that you're directing in a different way maybe than you have experienced other directors approaching their work?
Yeah, I guess so. I think what my acting experience has helped me with is, instead of telling the actors the final result I want, I kind of have a sense of how to get to the final result. So I'll give them directions that are not directly related to what I want to see. For example, in the scene where the gallerist goes like, turns around and say, who did it? You know, I might be getting the dialogue wrong. He turned around and he said it with the anger all up in his head. He was like panicky and a bit hysterical. And I told him, feel the anger coming up your legs from the ground. And as a result of that note, I guess his anger became more deep in his stomach and more connected to like a deep passion that he has and a deep belief, rather than this panicky, oh, what's going on now? Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And speaking of actors, like what was the casting process like? Because I recognized the actor playing the gallerist or the curator. This is what happens when I like don't speak English for a while. Like I always like, yeah, fall out of it a bit. But anyways, yeah. So how did you go about like casting the different actors? Were there only professional actors, or were there some non-professional actors? Like what was that like?
Yeah, there were some non-professional actors that were invited, and it was primarily because it was so difficult to find certain actors from certain demographics, like the guy from America. It was at that time I just couldn't find someone who was Black and had an American accent. And also the Asian mother, she's actually Norwegian, but she is Korean and she looks Korean. And I just couldn't find an Asian actress of that age. But when it came to Breda, the main character, he had actually applied to be the art student who just hardly has any lines and just chews gum. But I saw his reel and it was so good. He was electric. He had this weird like energy. And I just asked him to audition for the main role, and I had no one else lined up for it. And he got the part because he just had the right energy for the character.
Cool. So how much prep did you have with the actors prior to shooting? If any at all? Just thinking of your background as a trained actor, like I'm curious if you value like rehearsals and if that played into any part into the preparation for the shoot.
Yeah, I mean, I would have loved to have like a month of rehearsals. I actually, for another short film I did in Korea, I had 2 months of rehearsals with the actors for an 18-minute short film. So, which is like a huge luxury, right? But with this one, I had one whole afternoon with Breda at the Oslo 16 offices, thanks to them, where we discussed the character's motivations and his energy. And we went through all the lines and beats, figuring out why he says certain things. With the other actors, I had very little time. I think I had one evening with them, mostly to work out the movements and stage directions. But everyone was pretty, like, very talented. And with Breda, I think every time something came up that I thought might help his character, I sent it to him by email. And thankfully, he didn't find me controlling or annoying. And that's, oh, thank you, that helps. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And then you had one day of shooting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A long day.
A long day. Yeah. How many hours did you shoot for, if you remember?
I think it was around, I don't know, it might have gone against the rules in Norway, about 10 hours.
You don't have to say. I don't want to. No, I'm just curious because it's because I've done that as well, like with short films, and oftentimes with projects I've done through Mediefabrikken, where we have one day of shooting, and which is, I mean, obviously a challenge, but sometimes it can be a blessing as well, because you really need to like concentrate, like you said, on what what frames and angles to shoot and like what to prioritize. But it's definitely a challenge for sure. And I'm wondering, maybe like apart from like the negative challenges, if like were there any positive aspects that came out of that, you think?
I think it probably added to the whole chaotic feeling of the film. Because when you have like very little time, it can easily get chaotic, right? Because I have this very bad habit of, when I have very little time, I kind of throw the shot list out the window and start like prioritizing the different shots in my head. And saying, okay, this has to go. And then the first AD goes, poor Anita. But it kind of had to be done. We didn't have enough time to kind of communicate down the line of communication as to like which scenes should be prioritized, which not. Yeah. So it did become chaotic, and that chaos, I guess, like kind of worked for the film in a way.
Yeah. Did anything end up being cut like on that day as a result of it?
Things ended up becoming cut because I forgot to include them.
You forgot in the chaos.
Yeah, because I was just kind of going up, and I don't recommend this to any young filmmakers. I thought I knew the shot list by heart, and I kind of like, okay, that can go, but there were a few things that I should have filmed that I forgot.
Yeah. That happens though, and especially on like smaller productions like this one, and likewise things that I've done in the past as well.
Really?
And well, yeah, and also like on a production with like little fires everywhere, like you have to prioritize, and then there's always like something that you forget about, or have to eventually.
Right.
Yeah, I'm curious about your collaboration with the cinematographer Lucas Samaro. Is that his name?
Yeah, Lucas Amaro. I think he shot the latest Knacken film, faktisk. Yeah. And then he was the Norwegian DOP for Tiger King. Oh, so he was like, I was really hitting above my league there. Yeah, he's a true professional. He had so much more experience than me. So even when it got completely chaotic, he didn't panic. He was so slick. He kind of knew what to do. And even though it must have been frustrating for him to work in that situation with me, he went, okay, if that's a shot you need, I'll do it. I'll get down in the sand and let's do it, even though I kind of don't know where the shot list has gone. Yeah. So yeah, a true professional, really talented.
How did you go about like establishing the look of the film and deciding like whether or not to like shoot handheld and all of this? Like how much time did you spend together like deciding on the visual look of the film?
I think we had several meetings, where we spent hours talking about it, but the look of the film was pretty obvious from the start. We wanted it to be handheld because it had to like gradually go into this chaotic movements of the camera towards the end. And also we wanted it to kind of feel like a documentary, as if it was happening, because it happens in real time, right? I guess the aesthetic, which is kind of related to that, is like a documentary aesthetic where you don't feel that we're trying hard to make things pretty. We're not trying to get the perfect light. And actually we had no extra lights. We just worked with the lights that we had in the room, which makes things look pretty ugly, but that was intentional. It was a bit intentional.
Yeah, definitely. So coming back to Ulike Blikk, I'm curious like how, like in what way the program assisted you in developing this short, and how you feel the film like benefited from going through this process. I'm thinking of like people who might be listening who are thinking of applying to maybe this program or like a similar one. If there's anything you can say to how if you can say something to how you feel like you've benefited from it, and like what you learned from it, and
sure. I learned so much. It was my first program with Mediefabrikken, and I learned a completely new way of receiving and giving feedback. I've been to several workshops before, but here I worked closely with Anniken, and her method was to, instead of suggesting, oh, why don't you do it like this or that, or oh, I don't like this part, she made it more about her interpretation of the script. Which meant that it was up to me to decide whether that interpretation or that feeling that she was having was what I wanted. And that applied to the whole group. So we would share our scripts, and then we would get that kind of feedback from everyone. And then you have this group, not consensus, but an idea of what the public or what the audience might think of the film, and if that's what you want. Yeah. And that was really, really important for me in developing it. Yeah.
So speaking of the audience reaction, like what's it been like when you've screened the film? Because it was at the it showed at the Norwegian Film Festival last summer, right?
Yeah.
What was like the feedback or takeaway from the audience?
You know what? It was online because of COVID, so I didn't really get to receive much feedback. But I know the feedback from the people I showed it to, like kind of personally, one-on-one. And a lot of people, I think, found it entertaining. And I showed it to my sister-in-law, who's an art photographer, but she's also studying art history and wants to become a curator. She found the different viewpoints regarding art very interesting, because she could empathize with every single viewpoint. Oh, this needs to be preserved. Art is holy. And then, what is this trash? No one understands what this means.
The guy who just goes bullshit.
Yeah.
Just, like, tears like his view of everything, like of the art installation, just like apart, like brutally.
And if I can go back a bit back to like how Ulike Blik helped me develop it, like related to that was, I guess, Anniken really encouraged me to expand that discussion between the people, because she thought it was a discussion that was worth exploring. And maybe it wasn't explored as much as I would have liked to, or she would have liked to, but it's there. And without Mediefabrikken, I don't think that discussion would have taken place. It would just have been more about like, emotions, actions,
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like I've said, we did the Ulike Blik program together, and I've done a few of their different programs in the past, and it's been incredibly helpful, like how they've given feedback and how they've never specifically said like change this or anything like that, like you said, but more like ushering you like towards like making the best film that you can, basically.
And I found them really encouraging. Like after the shoot, I was convinced that I didn't have enough angles to make it into a complete film. I was like so convinced, and I was planning reshoots and everything. And Anniken just said, actually, I think you have everything you need, and try and work with what you have. And that's a huge trust to have in a new filmmaker,
Yeah. And then you ended up editing it together with someone else, or did you do?
With a filmmaker called Michael Mellomlokken Renje, who's actually who's actually a student at Norsk Filmskolen with me right now at the Registolen master program. And so he's a director, but he's also a super good editor, and he's so good at knowing what's the bare minimum, what's needed to tell the story, and he's really good at knowing what to cut. And I would go, no.
What was that? Or how did that help you? Or how did you find that collaboration? Have you worked with another editor before, or have you like edited your own shorts in the past?
I did a combination of both in the past, and I always really liked working with editors because they bring a new thing into the project, right? And they have a slightly different tempo from you. So when I was kind of struggling with the edit, Michael came in by Annika's suggestion, and he shortened the film by like 4 minutes or something.
Oh, wow.
And it was like a shock to the system when I first saw it, but at the same time I felt like it was a good kind of shock, like the story hit me on a very gut level instead of it being prolonged. And so we started from there, and in the end I ended up lengthening the shots like tiny bits, kind of to kind of make it steer it towards more my tempo. But he did an amazing job at simplifying the story.
I wanted to ask you also, like, what if there were other inspirations, maybe not like in terms of the action or the action of the film, but more specifically like other visual references or that you drew inspiration from.
I remember people commenting on how it reminded them of the square before they saw it, when they just saw the script. And I think I can't say that I wasn't inspired by it, because I really liked the film and the topics. In terms of visuals, maybe documentaries, but it's very difficult I can't really pinpoint which films or which TV series they were, but I remember The Office.
Right. Oh yeah.
The Office. I loved their style of like complete disregard for what's pretty, but at the same time knowing how to frame things so that the story is told effectively.
But no, the square is it's interesting that you mentioned the square, because it is definitely something that I did think about when when I first heard your pitch of the film, but it's not something that I necessarily thought of when seeing it, or after having seen Trash. Like, I didn't really like think that was like a mere copy, or like it kind of stood out on its own to me. But
That's good.
yeah. Well, you never want to copy any filmmaker's previous work.
Yeah,
Like, what
yeah.
would be the point of doing that? But
I think ugliness was pretty important to me, and the kind of, because, or the mundaneness, kind of, because it would be the opposite of what the gallerist would want people, well, how the gallerist would want people to perceive the artwork, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wanted to do the opposite of that.
I want to get into like the other projects that you mentioned in the very beginning, the feature that you're developing with the BFI, and the series that you're developing at the Norwegian Film School for your master's degree. If you can talk a bit about those projects.
Yeah, sure. The feature film is something I've been developing for many years now. And we've gone through several different kind of funding programs from different institutions. We're at the final stage of the script development, I think. And we're at a point where we can really look at the script and say, okay, all the things that we weren't so sure about, but ended up keeping because of the momentum and because the BFI liked it, this is a point where we can say no to them and change it in a way that really speaks to us. But it's a very difficult stage to be, because me, the writer, and the producer, we're kind of disagree on with what should be kept and what should be chucked out. But it's very exciting. It's about two young guys in London. It's London before Brexit and before COVID. So back when London was still quite exciting for a lot of Europeans, and people would go there to achieve their dreams. And so it's about, one of them is a foreigner, one of them is like a native Londoner. They're trying to make it in the fashion world by becoming models. But they have a lot of self-doubt, self-loathing, and fear of abandonment, which makes their relationship to each other both intense and destructive. And also, if you've got all these qualities, then when the world starts trying to use you for whatever reason, because of your beauty, because of your energy, because, I don't know, being mixed races in the fashion world at that moment, then it kind of creates this toxic feeling inside you, because you don't know what you're really getting into, and you don't really realize that you're being used. So that's what it's about.
Wow. That's really great. I'm really looking forward to to seeing that. And your master's project is a television series, right? I think you mentioned it's like 6-part or 8-part.
Yeah, 8-part right now. So 8-part, 30 minutes long for each episode. It's about a Korean student in Norway. She's left Korea because she felt like she couldn't be happy being the traditional Korean woman. So she goes, okay, I'm going to have one last adventure abroad. And she comes to Norway, starts studying Ibsen. And it's because she read The Doll's House as a child in school, right? And you have this, like, the world's first vision of a modern woman who is not just a housewife, but has dreams of her own. But then she falls into a group in Oslo that is ultra progressive, people who do psychedelics, microdosing, who practice polyamory. And then she is both inspired and gets lost in it, which often is the case. Nothing is completely bad or completely good. And this creates a lot of conflict between the people who are supposed to look after her in Norway, the Korean family friends and also her family back in Korea. And so in the end, she's given a choice to choose between the two lifestyles. Yeah.
Cool.
That's what it's about.
So that's in the development stages right now, or are you writing the script for it, or
yeah, it's in developing stages right now. And right now we're working on a scene where she's tripping and she sees the moon getting bigger and bigger and bigger in the sky. And of course we need CGI or like the green screen for it. But we're using this new technology called virtual production, which is kind of like a mix between green screen and virtual reality, basically. So we're testing out this new technology in order to realize that scene.
So is that like a sort of like a test shoot for the or a pitch for the series?
Yeah, I'd say it's more like a test shoot. The goal is to find a way to visualize her tripping scenes, basically, in the series. You know, finding a visual style that strikes the right balance between subjective experiences, the subjective reality and the objective reality. Yeah.
And this is like a two years master's program, or is
it?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 2 years master's program, and I'll do some PR for the Nordic Film School. Not that they need it, but it's a really good program. Yeah, I'm in Kull 3, so it's the third batch of students, and the great thing about it is that for 2 years while you're there, they don't accept new students. You don't get a new like batch of students coming up while you're still in second year. Like for 2 years, they just focus on you, and they choose 4 people for each department. And yeah, the kind of veiledning and the undervisning we've been getting is incredible. You get a lot of people from the industry who are actively working, coming in, and giving a lot of advice on your own project, but also kind of about the industry in general.
So what's the final product that comes out of those 2 years? Is it like a produced pilot episode, or is it the script, or
it's kind of dependent on you, what you want your master's project to be and what you want to aim for. But I think a lot of the director students end up shooting a pilot episode that's a bit shorter than what a normal pilot would be, so around 10 to 15 minutes.
Right.
And then a lot of people develop the whole first season in a very detailed way with a lot of guidance. And I think a lot of people write the first episode as well.
Right.
And then you are given to do so much research. You are given money to go and travel abroad if you want to, for the sake of the film. But obviously these days you can't.
Yeah, a bit difficult with COVID, but still, I mean, great that that's like there as an opportunity.
Yeah, it's a huge luxury. Yeah.
Well, great. I want to finish off our conversation by asking you if you've seen like a film or a television series lately that have inspired you, and perhaps if you could talk about why.
Yeah. I sometimes get obsessed with a TV series or a film, and I just watch it over and over and over again. And I bet a lot of people can empathize with this. Right now, it's Succession from HBO.
That one's great.
Yeah, I know. And I just I don't watch the episodes over and over again while I'm cooking or cleaning.
I get that though, but I don't know. I would love to like rewatch all of Succession, but I would just feel so guilty about it.
Yeah, I know. Like I'm wasting my life basically. Right? But what's really helping, it's making me realize how well written it is. How all the storylines and characters are set up for this climax in the end. And it's set up in such a good way. But at the same time, sometimes you go like, oh, okay, this seems a bit intentional, and I can see why the writers put this in, and it doesn't completely make sense. But yeah, so yeah.
Still, it has its moments. I think it's like
so good.
Written. Yeah,
it's so good, and it's making me. And I watched an YouTube interview of all the actors from Succession. And what was really surprising was that they work with multiple cameras, But not only that, the actors are not really aware of whether they're being shot or not. So they're just like doing their thing and like going through the whole scene. And it's up to the cameraman to pick up the actors acting at the right moment.
Oh,
It's incredible. Yeah. So they say like it's almost like theater.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah, and for somehow they make it work with the sound and everything. Everyone's talking at the same time, that they do some magic with the sound so that it doesn't really overlap.
Yeah, no, because you don't really get a sense that it's overlapping in a disruptive way by any means. But I mean, that's why I love also like shooting just, I mean, one takes and just keeping the camera rolling, is because you can allow like that overlapping of dialogue, which is just great for like stuff like improvisation, for instance.
Right, yeah.
I love doing. But yeah, that's really interesting. I never like I never really like, apart from like being very entertained, got into like how they had actually gone about shooting it. But that's really interesting to know.
Yeah. I think it frees up the actors a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Well, thank you so much for interviewing me and talking to me. Yeah.
And I should remind everyone who's listening or watching, because this is like a podcast that's being posted on YouTube also. Check out the film on it's on your Vimeo as well, but also on Mediefabrikken's website. So yeah.
One fun fact: the child in the film that destroys the art piece is actually my daughter, who destroyed the actual art piece in the gallery.
Yeah. Oh, it's a nice cameo. Making your acting debut very early.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Well, good luck with all of your projects, and I hope to speak to you soon again.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck with your projects as well, Anna.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.